Michael McCluskey. How are you, sir?
Very, very well, thank you.
Good. Now, who are you and what are you doing here in El Salvador?
I am I'm an American, as my accent shows. El Salvador, I'm from the U.S. I grew up in the U.S. I find that the older you get, the more like things that you were interested in middle school actually come out. So I was like interested in like technology. I was like coding, little things. I was interested in economics. I was interested in like my dad was like a gold bug. So like all of these things, if you like keep the thread going and then you tie them together, it kind of ends in Bitcoin. And so I was working at a Bitcoin startup called Strike. Some people know it. Jack has a very good podcast. And I was working as an engineer. Came here in 2022, Bitcoin country. Like what's it about? I had to see, and so that's kind of what brought me here. And I've been working on stuff ever since.
Wow, awesome. So you came to El Salvador originally to work on Bitcoin.
Yes.
That's awesome with Strike.
Yes.
That's awesome. And now, are you involved in certain initiatives, projects, anything like that? What do you got going on now?
Yes, many things. So main project I'm focusing on at the moment is called Palestra Society. Palestra is kind of a collection of art, culture, technology, health, all bound together by kind of this desire to see humans live more vital lives, to provide sort of an example in this sort of digital world of a physical place where people can kind of come together and build things that maybe were born on the internet but need a physical place to sort of emerge and develop and grow and flourish.
So Palestra has been hosting events, speaker nights. Do you call those events? I guess so. Yeah. And so is this modeled after something else you've participated in the past or witnessed, or how is this being, I guess, built? What is the design?
I think, a lot of it came out of the desire to bring the group chat in real life, where like you've got, interesting people on the timeline sharing, ideas, and the X or kind of like different forums, even Bitcoin Talk, and kind of bringing them to share their ideas to different audiences in a different place. It's kind of like supporting them or kind of platforming them. So the idea, behind Palestra was just to kind of get everyone together and, have an event where people are sharing about different cultural ideas, different tech, different health, things that maybe are kind of digital first ideas or ideas that kind of developed on the internet first and kind of need a place to spill out into.
All right, so it's a network tribe.
Algo así.
Yeah. So the idea of a society, can you talk about that a little bit? Because we're developing a little bit of a community here, and community might not even be the right word, and we see you with the word society. Is there a difference there
between community and society? I think society kind of implies this contribution, sort of like where each member sort of has a stronger mandate to contribute. A community seems it's more passive; it exists, but I think society, there's this impetus, there's this sort of push to it.
Yeah, like if you're a Freemason or you're in some kind of fraternity, there's membership dues, right?
Yes.
And then even if that's all the contribution is, there's that financial part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like a society is also a little more established with their beliefs, with their structures. There's like an actual, mission, purpose to it, where a community feels a little bit more, how would you say that? Just a little bit less put together, like a little less constructed.
Because community is natural.
Organic.
It sprouts up anyway, right, amongst humans. So maybe what we're saying here is society is the next step of focusing in on intention.
Yeah, and like community. I mean, the internet community. Like what does that mean? And so like you can kind of hone in on different things, different themes. Kind of have more of a closed-ended, almost mission as well, where like a community is kind of this amorphous thing. Society, has goals, has like maybe specific things in the agenda, and I think it's very interesting. The World Economic Forum, has this. They sort of operate on this agenda, and some people, may agree with it, some may not. But I think like that is sort of something, where you kind of begin to see these ideas or themes take place and say, oh, that looks like a society. I kind of get what they're going for there, because there's some sort of series of stated goals.
Well, one thing I really appreciate about Palestra, and I haven't made to any events yet, even though I've RSVP'd to some, but it's very advanced. The topics, the themes, I mean, advanced, using that term for a lack of better words, but once again, like you said, these are ideas that kind of sprouted on the internet, and you're bringing them here. Like somebody like Moritz coming, I connected with him like 8 years ago, like 2 bull runs ago, on a completely different conversation points. But then I was looking at what he's talking about with statecraft. I'm like, whoa, like where, we talk about Bitcoin, even El Salvador. I imagine going to this Adopting Bitcoin conference. It's only a certain level of conversation here, right? Even though it's kind of a foundation for a lot of what Palestra's talking about and what we talk about. But the speakers you have to come speak about all of these subjects, philosophy, health, etc., it's like, it's really next level. And I don't know, where else would you find an organization hosting talks like this in the world in real life?
Well, first, thank you. I think El Salvador, we talk about El Salvador kind of as this, like, there's sort of the joke people say, like, America's an idea. But like there is kind of like the idea that's El Salvador, that's like this possibility zone where like you can kind of get into the depth of it because you think it's possible. And like your brain, as long as you can keep together like the dopamine from being like spent, then you can actually like kind of build it up to actually cash it in more like metaphorically on something real, something substantive in El Salvador that I think, because of whatever, a lot of conditions, like you don't have as many obstacles as maybe, a lot of us are used to in the United States or in Europe or broadly speaking. And so like, I think that like knowing that you express this idea and it actually is not just into the void on the internet, which as we've mentioned, like you kind of can draw threads and draw the people together and everything, but like you've got, kind of this atmosphere where anything seems possible. I imagine like frontiersmen, in the 19th century or something, maybe felt that when they're kind of exploring America, or, there's the Alex Jones montage, on the Founders Fund video where he's like, Magellan's doing all these cool things. And so like, I don't know, like Elon's definitely doing some cool, like, stuff, trying to go to Mars. We're here like on Earth still. So it's kind of a cool place to be.
Yeah, and the guests that you got going on, they're super interesting. You got a talk coming up on Monday, right? Is it internet based kind of webinar talk?
Yeah. So we have a talk. Moritz Bierling, he's the vice president of Natural Law Institute and contributor to a lot of things. I find out more and more what he's working on a lot of cool stuff. So he's going to be speaking about kind of natural law and statecraft, how states can look at natural law for inspiration for designing policy that benefits the people of their country or jurisdiction. And he's the expert on that, so I'll let him get to it. But
yeah, and that's super fascinating. I feel like it's kind of an idea whose time has come, right? This idea of creating a society, but like in conjunction with the world we live in now, and in tandem with nation states and stuff like that. How does that happen? At least that's some of the ideas that we've been thinking about, and I think that talk's gonna be super cool.
Yeah, I just see Palestra society as a super crucial element to this renaissance here in El Salvador, because a lot of this philosophy is being played out, but it needs to be spoken about. It needs to be kind of flushed out in the thoughts. People need to be thinking about what all this really means, going a few steps further into idea land, into imagination, into talking about how natural law could be put into place in policy. Because if it's not talked about, if it's not discussed, if it's not put into the consciousness first, then it's never going to happen in reality. So I really appreciate what you're doing here.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, it's really synchronistic to what we're doing too. It's really cool.
Totally.
Yeah. And the house too, the Palestra house, right? It's just an inspiring house. You're like on top of San Salvador, probably one of the best views I've seen so far of the city.
Volcanic soil, it's powerful. You can ground on that, and you can kind of supercharge. It's on a volcano. I mean, like everyone's coming through here, and we just want a place, to have they could stay for a night, for a week, for a month, whatever, and experience, kind of see El Salvador and be a part of it, whether it's giving a talk or just kind of passing through. Ideas need physical places. Like you hear of like movements, like the American founding fathers, they had like these bars they would go to, or like tavern, whatever inns, and they'd have these places. And so you just kind of have to find the end of your idea or your frontier.
Yeah, it's the idea of a third place, right?
Exactly.
You have a home, you have work, and then you have a third place where you hang out and talk about ideas. And in the fiat culture, it's just about, I guess, drinking beers. But at some point there, they were actually discussing really, powerful concepts. And it's happening here again over in El Salvador. Like the cultural revival, I think, is real.
So I and probably many others want to hear more about this Lidar initiative that Palestra is doing. So I know Lidar from Graham Hancock talking about the scans of the Amazon jungle, finding old ancient cities that, modern standard archaeology doesn't acknowledge their existence. How's that being used here?
Yeah, so Graham is great. I basically, El Salvador, of all of the countries in the region here, has not had much mapping, excavation, for a lot of reasons. Namely, it was a pretty dangerous place for a while. And so that provides a lot of cool opportunities to kind of gain new insights into the history of El Salvador. What is under these hills? You've seen a lot of hills, maybe going through, especially Santa Ana, Sonsonate, and then also in the eastern part of the country. There are already some identified archaeological sites, kind of even parks, San Andres, Tazumal, Chalchuapa. There's multiple others. Those are sort of the bigger ones. And so those sites, they've not been fully, even mapped. There's not like a topographical map of, a lot of these sites. And so, basically with new technology and LiDAR, and some of it's not too new. You can scan and develop a kind of an elevation model of the site and determine anomalies from there, and similar sites in Tikal, which is in Guatemala, Copan, in closer here in Honduras, have all had these kind of runs, and so in El Salvador it'll be kind of a new thing.
Because when you see, they have images of like hills, like this hill, for example, whatever, if it was in the right shape and it's kind of an anomaly in volcano land, you see images of this online and you go, there's actually a pyramid under here, but you would never know because of everything that's grown over it.
Yeah.
So the LiDAR allows you to see the structures that are underneath the earth.
Yeah. So typically like under vegetation. So if you have like a, somewhat thin vegetation layer, LiDAR can penetrate. There's also ground penetrating radar, which we might also employ for some of the sites.
And what are you looking for?
Temples. I mean, anything really to find the, to understand the history of El Salvador, because from what is known, it was sort of this boundary, this frontier ground between different ancient kind of tribes here, civilizations in the region. And
it was the end of Mayan territory, right?
Exactly. That's what most archaeologists believe. And it also, just because of the terrain here, it was the migration zone from north to south. And you can figure, kind of Graham, notably believes that first contact in the Americas was in South America, and everyone kind of went up north. Conventional archaeology believes that people came down from the Bering Strait and kind of southward. And so, some of these discoveries may actually it's gonna say something. So we'll just,
so it can offer a contribution to the conversation.
Absolutely.
How did you get involved in that?
I've got this drone, and I was like, well, are we gonna use it for mapping? And I use it for some, projects that are not archaeologically related, right? Topographical mapping of properties of hills, of construction projects as well. And so, it's just a kind of an opportunity where I thought, maybe this could be cool for the country to, kind of take this knowledge and also present it to people, to take, the history of El Salvador, because a lot of Salvadorans, they think no one cares about their history. It was a place that people wanted to leave, and having the opportunity to sort of maybe gain some knowledge and actually show it to Salvadorans, particularly young Salvadorans who may, really going to be they're going to be inspired by this, I assume, kind of how I was with like Indiana Jones or whatever. But like this is like real. Bringing it into museums, bringing it to the library, bringing it elsewhere.
Yeah. I was having a conversation about this with someone recently. You go to Mexico, you go to Guatemala, and there's a very clear sign of the history of the Mayan, of the Aztecs, whatever it is. It's everywhere. And this person I was talking to believed that because there was a lack of incentive in El Salvador to continue that kind of cultural tradition in the last like 50 years. So tourism never developed around that, which is why we don't see any of it. It was never discovered, or they just like dropped it off. Like we went to that resort for the having party and there were like Mayan statues and stuff. And that's when it first hit me like, wait a minute, was this Mayan territory? You'd never know unless you specifically went to a site that explained that to you. And I think this kind of ties into why it's important what you're doing.
It would be interesting, I think, for Salvadorans as well, right? Like you said, you're like reviving their history, and giving them a new sense of identity too, or adding to their identity with whatever discoveries you unfold. That's going to be really cool.
To tell the future, you really just want to go really, 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 really far back. So if people want to predict the future, it's a good way to just kind of like, try to go back, and then you kind of know what people are doing a long time ago, and sort of, I don't know. That's sort of another way of tying maybe into Palestra, like tech development. But one more, like, I think the Ministry of Culture is doing really great work, really like reviving these projects. A lot of things were like kind of stalled out. Now that it's safe, it's cool to see. But yes.
What's your impressions of El Salvador? Like when you came here, were you immediately sold? What made you stay? Like what do you make of Bukele and all the changes that have occurred over here? And like, what have you seen since the time you've been here?
Yeah, I mean, it's like personally, right? I came here. I was working at Strike, and there was a Strike office, and there was like 15 or 20 people working here, and which was like great. So I could like come and not just be kind of like floating around. I've kind of floated around as a nomad. I lived in Mexico for a bit, elsewhere. And like to actually come here and then kind of have some sort of community that I was like able to plug into that felt, more dynamic. And that was like, I'd say a really big thing that like kind of kept me like here engaged. And like I came here right after like COVID times in the US. It was like the first country I traveled to because they didn't require the vax here for foreigners to come. And so like, I don't know, like it just seemed like anything was possible. Like it's people are kind. If you want to meet the owner of some business, like he's kind of accessible, and it's just a place where I've kind of maybe said that a lot, but I think that was really what kept me here, and I like got a girlfriend as one does, and like just kind of continued. Like
planting roots
in many ways, having more, like kind of growing a social network, and then more people are coming and they're working on stuff, and like our time is like, in life is limited. So like you kind of have to focus, but it's cool to like see other people working on things that you also want to see succeed. Where like, in 2021 or 2020 in the US, it just felt like the world stopped. And so to actually just go to a place where like there was kind of momentum, and it wasn't just hope; it was actually being realized. That was cool. I came right at the beginning of the regime d'exception, which was the kind of the crackdown on against the gangs, and seeing like that actually things are safe and they're getting safer was actually like kind of reassuring that don't black pill too much.
Yeah, I think that hope and optimism and that feeling where you get where anything's possible is like just a byproduct of a country that's on an upward trajectory that just come out of some dark ages, right? And it's like been liberated. This dark cloud has been lifted, and I feel it too. And it's part of the magic that I think El Salvador offers, and it's a big reason why both Jordan and I are here. So totally. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. What was it like during those years after COVID here?
Well, I mean, like there's. Like, I think, like, if you travel, like, kind of in the region, like, Costa Rica, for instance, has a lot of, expats So like Costa Ricans won't necessarily like look at you like, oh, like this is like, we're not, what I'm getting to is like Salvadorans, we're not used to foreigners really traveling here that often. And so there would be like, kind of like there was like kind of an awkwardness, but it was kind of fun because I was like, oh, like I guess this is new. There's like a gringo speaking English or speaking Spanish to me. Like, so that was kind of like how it was, I think, in 2022, 2023. And now like, it's kind of, you're getting more and more visitors, more and more international recognition or even regional. With some of the events, like they did Miss Universe last year and the Central American Caribbean Games last year, which brings like a lot of people from the region. So just kind of like El Salvador changing from this place that was kind of totally forgotten, right? It's one of the best rebrands in world history. You couldn't pay, a marketing. I don't know how much you would have to pay a PR firm to rebrand the country.
It's not only a rebrand too. What's incredible to me is like the actual social changes that have happened and the totally. Speed at
it's
which
full on rebirth.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah, renacimiento.
Wow. Yeah, and cool. Yeah. So what's on the agenda over here in El Salvador?
Well, we've got I've got a few different things. Obviously, we've talked about Palestra, and some of the kind of work there. Longer term, we're looking to build a kind of a small village to sort of grow the house.
Can we talk about that real quick?
Sure. Yeah.
Or just some general ideas around that. Yeah. So is this kind of like similar concept to kind of a citadel or something like that, or is it more of a housing development? Like how are you looking at that?
So we like at Palestra, we see kind of three different, I would say like rings of our kind of competency rings. We've got technology, just like a lot of people who join Palestra or contribute are working as engineers kind of in that sphere. We have health. So a lot of contributors. Jack Cruz has spoken at 3 of the events. He's very, he's a good friend. He's a big figure here in El Salvador. So health and just sort of changing your environment can change your health. So that's a big thing. And then culture and kind of how all 3 of these things fit together. So with whatever we build, those 3 kind of competencies are going to be represented physically. So health, I'm thinking, some type of hospital is a big word. I think the word, when we think hospital, we'll eventually like think of a completely different place, one that doesn't have fluorescent white lights, one that's open, one that is near grass and not in a parking lot. But something like a hospital, maybe, something like a kind of a technology gallery where technology that's not stealing like your soul is present and displayed, and you can actually use devices that are complement your life experience. And then culture, and culture is extremely broad, but yeah. So that's kind of what I think of like, and a place where people can sleep, and stay and live.
How far are you along in that process?
It's pretty far.
Really? Wow, that's cool. That's surprising.
Yes, yeah. So we'll see.
You got the land?
Well, more to come.
Okay. I found my boundaries.
No, very good.
Well, maybe that's a good.
It's good to find them. That's good.
Maybe that's a good transition into real estate.
Sure.
So
yes.
I don't know if we can ask you, have you found the real estate yet for this village?
We have. There are a few sites identified.
Yeah.
We'll say cool. Yes.
And so your relationship with real estate in El Salvador, you're working on a project, right?
Yes. So coming soon is, well, I'll talk a little bit about real estate in El Salvador broadly and what kind of needs to be fixed, what's good, et cetera. So if, like you guys know, it's expensive. Like it's kind of like the price of like maybe a mid-size US city.
Yeah.
Whereas like incomes in mid-size US cities are like 60K, 70K, 80K. Here, obviously much lower. So like, you have a disconnect between housing prices and, kind of general income. And a lot of that, I think, comes down to like, people wanting to win the lottery. If you want to sell your house and you hear that your neighbor, some gringo who's got millions of dollars, he bought it, for, this high price. And so everyone sort of recalibrates to that. And so information, finding like, what is the real value for both buyers and sellers is really huge. In the US, we have like Zestimate. It's not always good, but it can be pretty close, or the Redfin stuff. So, that's kind of a problem. And also just like fragmentation here in the market. Like in Quintra 24, you have like spammy ad sites that just feel like they're classifieds. You don't have like kind of just a beautiful, simple site that's just like, if you want to search for this, in this colonia, in this departamento, like you can't really do that. So that's what we set out to fix, right? Where, you can kind of go to one place, have a beautiful site, not too dissimilar from like Zillow or Redfin or like these, maybe, competitors in the United States, for finding property, for finding real estate to buy or rent. So the project is called Vivo Latam. Vivo Latam, it's going to go live in a week or two.
Whoa.
So yes, yeah. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so can we touch on what that means to find the actual price between buyer and seller? Because I know everyone talks about how the gringos, if they just find it online, it's going to be a crazy different price than if you were to find it through the locals or the actual seller. So does this solve a problem in that regard? Does Vivo address this?
It has more competition. So bringing more comparable properties, like I think the idea of like a comp hasn't been established here. Like everyone thinks their property is like not like any of the others. It's mine. It's better. Okay. And like it's not really the case. So like that's a big thing, is just like getting one place where you can say like, okay, this is 4 bedrooms, this is 4 bedrooms, like, and they both kind of look the same. Why is this one double? And so getting that just kind of all kind of wrangled is a really big improvement here.
So it comes back down to data,
but it's a lot about data.
There's also not a lot of comparable properties here too. That's one thing I've noticed, because it's not like the United States where you have a lot of cookie cutter homes in the same neighborhood or something like that. And so you know what the person, your neighbor, sold their house for, so it's easy to compare what your house value is. But over here, I mean, the properties and the land can be so much different, right? Like, one house next to the other is not the same. Like one might be on the side of a cliff and the other one kind of doesn't have a road going to it or something like that. So
there's homes not too far from here. I don't want to dox it, but they went for 350 to 400, and now they're already on Facebook Marketplace within months of opening and being, available to live in, for 750 for sale. Now, I don't think it's been sold at that price, but someone believes it's worth that. Almost double what they paid already. And I wonder if this is just a case of what you're talking about. Everyone thinks theirs is the best.
It could be. El Salvador has a really unique situation, population-wise, right? You've got approximately 7 million Salvadorans who live here, and you have 2 to 3 million that live in the United States. And a lot of them moved there in the 80s or 90s. They bought their houses. They might be like net worth millionaires very, very easily. Many of them, they moved to Los Angeles, San Francisco, DC. Housing markets, pretty elevated. And so if they're buying property here, now that it's safe, a lot of people are looking to maybe retire here or just invest. So that has an impact on the property.
So they've been making North American money essentially for 30 years.
Yeah.
And they've got the savings, the middle class bank account to show for it, and then they're coming back down here, and suddenly 700 isn't crazy.
Yeah, like that's like Inglewood.
And then so there's also something I heard, that it's also Canadians driving the market here. Is it El Salvadorans and Canadians that are pretty much the main drivers of the market here?
There are a lot of Canadians. I don't know. Maybe a lot of Salvadorans also live in Canada as well.
Gotcha.
That's true. So like there could be some of that. But like, Bitcoin Beach or like that especially like San Blas, I noticed. It's because like Americans are taxed worldwide. Canadians, I don't think are. So like there's like there's a pretty big tax incentive to like live in a country like El Salvador.
And then what about, so one of the theories that I have is that people can just buy property here and kind of just sit on it because there's no real property tax or anything like that. So,
for most cases,
I have kind of heard of that. Haven't like encountered it myself because I'm not in the real estate market, but I've heard people tell me like, there's, he's selling his house for $1 million, and you're like, it's just a shack, but it's on beachfront or something like that. And he's like, yeah, he's content to just wait it out. Yeah.
It's, one thing is very different in the real estate market here versus say the United States is real estate agents typically don't have exclusive listings. So if you're like the real estate agent and like Jordan's also the real estate agent, then like you both would not want to like list exactly where the property is, because like I could also become the real estate agent by going there, And so just talking to the owner and saying like, hey man, I'm only going to take 2% commission. They're taking 3, or And so that's like, you see $1 million house and then it's like, why isn't there a picture of it? Like, okay, $1 million house in the US, like, okay, fine. You got 50 pictures. They're like well lit. So that's another thing that we're looking to, basically, to work on, to solve. Yeah.
So you're optimizing the listings over here, right?
Yeah.
The whole process of finding a property here in El Salvador and facilitating a more broader market.
Yeah, we want to basically distinguish or determine what is a listing and what are all of the ingredients of a good listing. You have to have good photos, you have to have the address, you have to have a lot of these things, and there's actually not too many places doing that now. So yeah.
I feel weird saying this, but I say it in a good way. It's almost like you're centralizing this real estate data here to make the market more efficient. Mm-hmm. Sorry to say that word, centralizing, but I feel like in this case, it's actually could be a helpful thing.
There's probably a better word for that.
Well, you you go to like one place, you go to the Bitcoin blockchain to like query things, right? You like hit and so like anyone can do it. So it's just sort of doing that. But yeah, it's like we're kind of
you're gathering the data.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but it's order to enhance. I mean, it's capitalism, right? It's order to solve a problem and enhance an experience.
Man, I tell you what, so we get a lot of inquiries in our work, right? In our day-to-day, people interested in El Salvador, interested in our retreats, interested in real estate. And for those people that are interested in real estate, that's the number one question. What website can I go to? Like, how do I find out?
Yeah, everyone's expecting it to be easy.
Yeah.
And now, so it'll be good to now pass them over to your site, Vivo, right?
Yeah, Vivo Latam.
Yeah.
So yeah, El Salvador, real estate, and now where are we at? I mean, what's your outlook here as far as, first of all, what's your impression of you came here early on with Strike to help develop out I guess Bitcoin infrastructure and help onboard people. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I mean, I was an engineer. Yeah.
Well, yeah, the kind of the mission of Strike. Okay. And what is your take on Bitcoin adoption here? I know when we came, we were surprised that it wasn't as it wasn't as prominent as we thought it would be. But it takes time. What are your just general thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, well, one thing more with Vivo is we'll help facilitate Bitcoin real estate purchases. But I also say the same thing. Like Bitcoin adoption is not super high, right? It's I don't know exact data, but it's like 2% or something of total transactions. I think it's something like that. But like, if you actually like really want to live your life completely in Bitcoin, like it's not easy, but it's not impossible. And the fact that it's not impossible does separate it still from everywhere else. I mean, the nation holding almost 6,000 Bitcoin, and like its GDP is actually like, you can actually like measure like pretty sizable increases in its GDP as a result of that. It's kind of cool.
Is it a result of that?
Well, yeah. I mean, like they've gained. I don't know what the gain is now, but it's like 100 million in an economy of like 30 billion.
So like unrealized gains in Bitcoin holdings contribute to GDP.
Well, I mean, like not
to the overall net worth of the country.
Yeah, kind of like the net worth. It's like the vault. It's like you got your gold, you got your
treasury.
It's your treasury, right? So that's been interesting, but like Bitcoin adoption is not super high, right? And I think like anyone who's been here kind of has realized that in El Zonte, almost everyone does. Outside of El Zonte, like you kind of have these like rings where like the further you get from El Zonte, the less people accept Bitcoin, with some exceptions here in the city. I think like as Bitcoin, it's going to be a lot of these things are cyclical. When it makes a new all-time high, then everyone's talking about it again. But until that changes, like I think adoption rates are going to stay somewhere similar. What we have.
So maybe as the market takes off, more Salvadorans are going to want to get into it.
They'll be like, oh, that $30 from Chivo, like it's like 200 now. Whatever.
I'm not. Well, I'm not convinced on that. I think just based off of my experience, because I got a story about this, right? I think it's just going to take time for Bitcoiners, right, to naturally bring people into the fold, right, organically. It's like, so this, this property that we're renting here, I asked my landlord at first when I signed the contract, hey, is it okay if I, pay you in Bitcoin? And the lawyer was there, my landlord was there, and the real estate agent was there, and they all bust out laughing, right? Fast forward now 3-4 months, and my landlord now takes Bitcoin. So it's just going to take time, and then once that network effect hits, once they realize, okay, there's like a huge economy here, a huge market that wants to use Bitcoin, it's like, it just becomes a natural progression towards accepted, because otherwise, you're putting yourself at a competitive disadvantage.
This is so complicated for me because I've tried to onboard people. And I mean, I think even in the case of the landlord, she wants to just convert it to fiat right away, right? Doesn't just go through Chivo to her bank.
Sure.
And that's kind of what everyone wants.
So just real quick, but that might change though with the price appreciation.
But I just noticed how like the people whose lives could be affected the greatest from Bitcoin don't need Bitcoin. They need dollars to survive, and they don't have savings. They don't have extra capital to save. And so that's just something I've been exploring. I'm curious though, because I wonder if part of a solution could be, about this new law being passed for the Bitcoin bank? Because I heard that some financial law had to be passed in order for this to be possible. But I just wonder if one day, if a regular bank, you could save Bitcoin in it. Now I know that's against the ethos of, self-custody and everything, but I just wonder if that would make it less friction for people to want to hang on to some Bitcoin if it's in the same account that they can also have dollars.
Yeah, it definitely could. We're like, even like Strike Wallet, you can swap, and it's like, you got like double balance. People think in dollars. Getting people to think out of dollars, even if their entire net worth is in Bitcoin, they're still thinking like, oh, today, like I gained this many dollars. And I even think like at Adopting Bitcoin conference, if we're honest, like how many people will accept Bitcoin there if they're in the farmer's market? Almost everyone will. How many of them will price their goods in Bitcoin?
None.
Basically none. Yeah. Except, well, I'm sort of leading up. My girlfriend has an orange juice company. We'll denominate in sats. But basically, no.
Start the trend.
You have to. It's like you're like, it seems like reckless because you pay all of your vendors in dollars, right? Like the orange guy, the whatever, right? And so you're like, well, someone has to like start just doing the sats thing and denominating it.
Yeah, it doesn't.
A lot of people do, but I think yeah.
It doesn't help that when you do denominate it, it's like, yeah, I'm selling my orange juice here for 0.00056 Bitcoin, right? Yeah. Like it complicates things. Yeah.
Back when Bitcoin was like 9 or something, I had a client that wanted to pay me in Bitcoin for a video I made, and it was 0.1 Bitcoin. And I thought, what if I always just made my videos like a 0.1 Bitcoin? And I think about that today. So 0.1 Bitcoin, that would be 7,000 a video, up from like 900 a video 7 years ago. And I would look at the trajectory of a good career. If I was getting better at it, I'm like, oh, that probably could still be the price. But then you time in, well, I needed that money to live and all this stuff. And then maybe it wouldn't make as much sense when Bitcoin was down to 4,000.
You know what?
2 years after that.
Yeah. But going back to like transitioning people on, like we're building a network now. We're working with different vendors, and we prefer to work with people that accept Bitcoin. So there's also, I think, going to be this, pressure, like I said, this competitive advantage of people that accept Bitcoin, because if we come across some vendors that are equally similar in the value that they provide, we'd still probably make the switch to someone that accepted Bitcoin.
It's like free market playing out. Like, oh, we're just going to go with this other vendor that accepts Bitcoin instead.
Yeah, and then they're going to be like, but no, wait, how do we do it? So that's where I see things possibly, the Bitcoin ecosystem / circular economy spreading.
And that also demonstrates to Bitcoiners how don't just come here looking for an easy way to go to Bitcoin land. Like, oh, you got to do the work to contribute to more people participating in this circular economy.
Exactly. Like not so many people are willing to swallow the orange pill right off the bat, right? Like it's going to take some proof of work behind that and to get them on board.
One interesting model of Bitcoin adoption is creating kind of a cooperative where you have like this cooperative, and it could just be like, a handful of businesses that all trade amongst each other in Bitcoin. And then, they kind of track the balance sheet. And then at the end of like a certain period of time, they pay all of their vendors out. And then you can kind of grow the cooperative, sort of iteratively, every time, like every month or something where it's basically like, this like, it is kind of like a society where you just like kind of trading Bitcoin amongst each other. And then like it kind of grows until it's vertically, you kind of have a vertically integrated society. I don't know. But if I was talking at the Adopting Bitcoin conference, I'd probably talk about that and I'd explore it more.
Well, can we? So I'm not clear on exactly what you mean by a cooperative, but it sounds interesting because I have a very similar idea in mind for a community, a digital community where basically there's a point system, right? And the point system incentivizes participation because what's the value in a community? Well, it's like people
reputation,
sure, but also what's the value of a community is I think is participation, right? You go in a community, there's no activity. It's like, okay, what am I doing in this community, right? And so how do we incentivize people participating? Like, how do we, if someone has a question here on how to move to El Salvador, how do we incentivize someone to actually answer that question if they're busy or what? Some people do it on their own, but anyways, we want to supercharge it. And so the idea is that with the money that the community brings in through membership, a certain portion of that is going to be allocated towards rewarding the highest producers in terms of participation. And so it seems similar to what you're talking about there. Am I off?
It's also more along the lines of society than community.
Yeah. No, it's pretty. Yeah, that was good. Absolutely. And actually, like Palestra, we're going to release something. Basically, we call them bounty board, like a bounty board for working on specific tasks, or ones that Palestra posts, but also ones that's kind of completely open, similar to like kind of looks like Hacker News right now. It's called Manila, like the folder or the city in Philippines, and it like basically having these like specific, like it's kind of like Fiverr but about like really cool stuff, and like if you're like, hey, like I need someone to come out and fly the drone for like a day for the Lidar thing. Like we're going to put that on there. Or like, for example, like someone here who works on different buildings in Centro Histórico, his name is Santiago Caprio. He's a architect and urbanist designer guy. He designed the garden adjacent to the National Palace.
Nice.
It's new. It's a beautiful little spot. So he actually reached out. He spoke at an event Palestra had in August, and he was like, like the doctor you had, Dr. Jack Cruz, was talking about some like really cool stuff about light. Like what can, like when I build buildings or work on stuff here, whether it's in El Salvador or he works all over, what can we do to make sure that like the lighting is good, that it's not harming people, that we're not using like these LEDs with a ton of blue light. And so members of Palestra, we wrote like there were 3 or 4 of us, Moritz is one. We wrote kind of a recommendation list for like low EMF or EMF free design patterns, and that was for free. But I was like, these guys have to get some sort of compensation next time. So basically having a program like, it's a great idea.
And yeah, if you have a society that's like geared towards a mission, geared towards a purpose, right? It's like, yeah, you have these bounties out there for furthering that cause, right? And it's like,
definitely.
Yeah. I love that. It's just a bounty board, and then the members just choose one, and you know what you'll be paid, you know what was required, boom, knock it out.
And then how do you decide? I know this was a big thing, like with like certain altcoin projects or something like that, right? Where it's like they wanted Ethereum maybe one of them or something like that. There was like the DAO, right? Where they're like going to have all these projects on there and they were going to vote on which ones get funding or which ones receive the bounty. Like, do you have a structure in place to kind of decide what projects to go after, or is it just...
At the moment, it's a monarchy.
Yeah, like who's allowed to post to the bounty board, right?
Yeah. Like ultimately, we'll have to have like a spam filter. Maybe like a certain amount a day, and like certain fields and things have to be filled out. But like at the beginning, you kind of want it the Wild West, and then you bring it, kind of hone it in. Nothing legal, but like stuff that's like small or large, and it's fun.
That's awesome. It's cool. This is what I think is so magical about El Salvador, is like I couldn't have these conversations really in Miami just off the cuff like this randomly, and it happens so often over here, right? Because I feel like El Salvador is just attracting a special type of person that thinks outside the box, dreams big, has cool ideas, and has the intelligence and also some of the experience to apply a lot of these ideas to life.
You could have it in Miami; they'll just think you're insane.
Yeah, exactly. You don't find a support network there. Yeah.
I kind of like I like Miami, but it's like good for like it's like kind of like Vegas. It's like good for a conference or 2 days or something. But yeah, man, like it's great to be here.
Do you see El Salvador then being like a magnet for kind of Bitcoiners and just other type of out of the box thinkers?
Yeah, like what's one thing that's it's encouraging about Palestra events is we try to get like people who have really different subject matter areas. Like one of my friends, Finn de Villiers, is a sculptor, and he like to have that fresh perspective of like the sculptor, what he thinks of El Salvador, because I was like in tech Bitcoin land, and like the fact that there's like some kind of like connection, and like there's a lot of connections actually, and like kind of collecting people like that are really trying to push the bound, like push their field forward. It's really cool.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool because he has a sculptor's way of presenting a perspective that I have my own way of like presenting it or articulating it, but hearing it put in a sculptor's words, and then also his ideas on like just civilization in general and how he thinks that we are moving towards something and we are constantly pushing towards that thing. This is based off what I heard from his talk.
Sure.
And but just the words that he used and the way he articulated it was very unique and made me think of the same concept that I would be thinking, but just in different words. Mm-hmm. And that's the cool aspect about you having all these different thinkers from across the board come in and give presentations. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming in and sharing everything with us and with the audience. This is like it's like just new layers being peeled back of what's going on in El Salvador, and you're doing some cool stuff. So.
Thank you guys. Yeah, it's been fun.
All right. Cool. Well, with that said, thank you so much for listening. Take care, guys.